Please, Mom, just sign here. Vanessa's voice still had that honeyed lilt from when she was 5, and begged for candy at the grocery store. Only now she was 35, her manicure immaculate as she nudged the pen into my fingers, and her husband, Sebastian, pressed his hand on my forearm with a grip that throbbed down to bone. We sat at a little laminate table in the bank public, bright, ordinary, the kind of place where no one expects a life to be dismantled. It's routine, Vanessa murmured, smile fixed for the cameras. A tiny transfer to tidy up the paperwork. But I had read the pages. It wasn't tiny. It was everything, my last $30,000, all that remained after Peter died 3 years ago. The air conditioning whispered cold against my neck, while heat climbed my chest in 6 sticky waves. Fluorescent lights stabbed at my eyes. The cash counters clicked and sang like insects in a dry field. Somewhere, a printer coughed. The world looked normal. I was the only thing breaking. Sebastian's breath, stale coffee, and cigarettes feathered my ear. "Come on, Olivia," he said, smiling without warmth. "Don't make this harder than it has to be. Think of Caroline." My granddaughter's name. The softest blade. The teller at the window was young and distracted. An older woman in line flicked through a brochure. A man in a charcoal suit scrolled his phone with ritual impatience. No one saw the way Sebastian's fingers tightened, a polite vice hidden under a family smile. No one saw my hand tremble so hard the pen tapped a nervous metronome against the dotted line. I had paid for Vanessa's pink bicycle, her summer camp, the private university that cost more than our house used to be worth. I had given them a down payment when they wanted a home. I had helped when Sebastian lost his job, when the refrigerator broke, when the car needed work, always a crisis, always urgent. Now they sat beside me like a pair of actors hitting their marks, rehearsed compassion painted on, waiting for the final scene, my signature. "Mrs. Anderson, is everything all right?" The bank manager appeared at the edge of the table. Mr. Thompson, silver hair, careful eyes, a tie that looked like it had seen 1,000 small disasters. He smiled the way professionals do, neutral, steady, safe. My heart seized on that safety like a lifeline. Vanessa's knuckles whitened around a folder. "We're fine," she chimed. "Just a family matter." "Of course," Mr. Thompson said mildly, but his gaze returned to me and didn't let go. Sebastian's fingers bit harder. A small, humiliating sound escaped my throat. "We don't want to make a scene," he whispered, teeth showing. "Sign, and we're done." The clock above the door ticked toward 3:15. A Tuesday. The week's most forgettable day. I felt my life funnel into a point so narrow I could barely breathe. I reached for the pen, and then, instead, for the margin of a brochure on the table. The letters came out slanted, like someone else's handwriting. "Help. I'm being coerced. I don't want to sign." When Mr. Thompson leaned to straighten a page, I slid the message beneath his palm. His brows lifted, just a fraction. Not shock recognition. He folded the note into his ledger as if it were nothing, then adjusted his stance, and I watched one hand ease under the desk where his computer keyboard Saturday a motion so small it could have been a scratch. A motion that felt like the earth shifting. My breath slowed one too thick with a relief that tasted almost like guilt. How had I become the kind of woman who begged for rescue in a place where savings were supposed to be safe? Then I remembered, I had always been the woman who said yes. Yes to the extra shift. Yes to the loan against our home. Yes to the wedding Vanessa wanted perfect. Yes, until my name scraped down to splinters. "Mrs. Anderson," Mr. Thompson said pleasantly, "for transactions of this size, we verify privacy and consent in my office. Just a moment of your time." Vanessa's smile cracked. "That's not necessary. My mother—" "It's policy," he replied, voice still polite, suddenly immovable. 2 guards repositioned themselves nearby, not close, just closer. Sebastian let go of me because he had to. Vanessa tightened on my other wrist and whispered, "Mom, don't you dare." I stood anyway. My legs remembered the weight of every midnight I had carried for other people. They trembled, but they held. If you want to know how I reached this table on a Tuesday at 3:15 with a pen that could erase my life, you need to know the woman I was before I learned to say no. My name is Olivia Anderson. I am 69 years old. For as long as I can remember, I have been the woman who says yes, the giver, the helper, the one who sacrifices until nothing remains. I didn't mean to become her. It happened in increments, the way a shoreline erodes grain by grain until an entire cliff is gone. I still remember the morning Vanessa was born. Spring sunlight spilled through the hospital blinds, so bright it made my eyes water, though maybe it was the tears of joy. After 12 hours of labor, they placed her in my arms, a tiny, perfect thing with her father's green eyes, and a cry that broke me open in ways I didn't understand then. I promised her she would never want for anything. That promise, born out of love, would become the chain that bound me for decades. When she was 5, she wanted a pink bicycle. 2 jobs apiece, Peter and I mopping floors at night, serving food at dawn. The bicycle cost $200, which might as well have been a fortune to us back then. But we bought it. Watching her wobble down the driveway, her laughter slicing the air, I told myself every blister was worth it. At 15, she begged for summer camp. $1,500. I sold my grandmother's jewelry, the only heirloom linking me to the women who came before. Vanessa came back from camp, sunburned and smiling, showing me crafts and songs I could never quite follow. She never asked how we paid. She just assumed we would, and we did. Then, college. A private university. $40,000 a year. Mom, it's my dream. I can't go to a state school. What will people think? Her tears melted every boundary I tried to build. Peter and I signed the loan papers, our house set as collateral. I worked nights at the hospital cafeteria, scrubbing trays while my back screamed. I told myself it was noble, that motherhood meant suffering without complaint. When she graduated with honors in business administration, I cried harder than I had at my own wedding. I believed it was the payoff. I believed the story would end there with her successful and me finally able to rest. But fairy tales rarely stop where we want them to. She met Sebastian at 25, handsome in a careless way, with dark eyes that skimmed through people like they were numbers on a ledger. At our first dinner together, before he even asked about my health, he asked if our house was paid off. That should have been my warning. Instead, I swallowed the unease, because Vanessa was radiant beside him, and my yes was already automatic. Their wedding? $50,000. I'm only getting married once, Mom. It has to be perfect. And it was perfect, her white lace dress glowing, her smile brighter than any diamond. But in the corners of my joy, I saw Sebastian scanning the room, eyes narrowing at the wealthier guests, as if each was an opportunity. We paid for the honeymoon too, another $5,000. I told myself it was tradition, a parent's duty. 6 months later, the calls began. Mom, the refrigerator broke. Mom, the car needs repairs. Mom, Sebastian lost his job, we can't make rent. Each crisis chipped away at my savings, at my ability to breathe without counting pennies. I answered with yes after yes, thinking the emergencies would pass, but they never did. And then came the biggest ask yet, the house, $200,000. They needed $40,000 for the down payment. They had no savings, bad credit, no plan beyond me. I drained the retirement fund, Peter, and I had scraped together for 20 years. 20 years of skipped vacations, mended clothes, beans instead of meat, hours on aching feet, all gone with a single signature. When I handed Vanessa that check, she hugged me so tight I thought maybe this time it would matter. You're the best mom in the world. I promise I'll pay you back with interest. Her tears glistened. Sebastian's thanks was colder, a formality, but I ignored the chill. 3 months later, they moved into a 2-story house with a wide backyard. I walked through it during the housewarming, pride dulling the ache of loss. My sacrifice, I told myself, had built this. That night, as they toasted with champagne, I washed the glasses in their shiny new kitchen and whispered, it was worth it. It had to be worth it. But the calls didn't stop. They grew louder, more constant, like waves crashing against a wall that was already cracked. The ink on the mortgage papers had barely dried when the next wave began. Vanessa's voice on the phone was no longer pleading. It carried an expectation, as though asking for money was as ordinary as asking about the weather. Mom, we can't live on the floor. We need proper furniture. It's embarrassing when guests come over. $10,000 vanished into a new living room set. Mom, the neighbors are complaining. The house needs a fence. Another $3,000 gone, swallowed by wooden boards and fresh paint. Mom, the kitchen is ancient. We can't cook properly with that old stove. $8,000 more for sleek appliances I never got to touch. Each time I hesitated, each time I said, I don't know if I can, she found the sharpest lever. Caroline. Caroline, my granddaughter, born when Vanessa was 27, a small miracle wrapped in blankets, with Peter's curious eyes and a smile that softened every ache. From the first moment I held her, I knew she was different, untainted by the greed that had taken root in her parents. She would toddle into my house with finger paint masterpieces, proudly pointing at a giant, smiling grandma with arms big enough to hold the sky. I made you big because your love is big, she'd say, her voice so pure it felt like a hymn. And so, every time Vanessa tied her requests to Caroline, I folded. Ballet classes $200 a month, piano lessons $300, summer camp $2,500. A recital gown that shimmered like frost under the lights $500. Caroline has talent, Mom. Do you want her to miss her chance? I told myself it wasn't for Vanessa. It wasn't for Sebastian. It was for Caroline. But money bled out of me all the same. Meanwhile, Peter was fading. His diabetes worsened, demanding injections, strict diets, endless visits to specialists, $400 a month for medicine, insurance covering only scraps. I worked double shifts at the hospital cafeteria, mopping floors after midnight, waking before dawn to serve eggs to doctors who never learned my name. My feet burned raw inside my shoes. I'd come home to cook for Peter, to help him bathe, to change sheets damp with sweat. Why don't you ask Vanessa for help? My sister Clara asked one afternoon, eyes narrowing at my swollen hands. You've given her over $100,000 in the past 5 years. Surely she can give some back. But the thought of asking Vanessa was unthinkable. Mothers don't beg their children. Mothers provide. I had been the pillar so long I couldn't imagine leaning on anyone else. Peter passed away one quiet Tuesday morning, just before dawn. I was holding his hand, whispering prayers I wasn't sure I believed anymore, when his chest stilled. 46 years of partnership ended in silence. I felt half my soul leave with him. At the funeral, Vanessa clung to Sebastian's arm, weeping in the front row, while I sat in black, numb, and hollow. When the house emptied and condolences turned to silence, I counted what was left. Between medical bills and the endless yeses to Vanessa, everything was gone. All I had was Peter's life insurance, $50,000. I swore then I would protect it. I would learn to say no. I would build a wall around those last dollars. But grief makes walls fragile. 2 months later, the phone rang. Vanessa's voice was frantic. Mom, Sebastian lost his job. His boss is a racist, fired him for no reason. They're going to foreclose. Caroline will have to change schools. Please, Mom, $20,000, just until he finds another job. My hand trembled around the receiver. $20,000, almost half of what I had left. But the thought of Caroline losing her home, her friends, her safety, my wall crumbled. I said yes again. Sebastian found work within 3 months. The money never returned. And I began to understand, dimly, dangerously, that what they wanted was not help. It was everything. 3 years after Peter's death, my life had shrunk to a careful rhythm of budgeting and silence. I lived on beans and rice, cut coupons until my fingers cramped, and stretched every dollar like taffy. My $50,000 in life insurance had already been reduced to $30,000 after Sebastian's emergency and a dozen smaller requests. I told myself, no more. $30,000 must last me the rest of my life. But Vanessa never stopped calling. Mom, Caroline's ballet recital is coming up. She can't perform without the new costume. The other girls will laugh at her. Mom, the car broke down again. We can't take Caroline to school unless we fix it. Mom, just this one time. Each plea came wrapped in love, tied with Caroline's name like a ribbon, and each time I felt the weight of guilt pressing me toward yes. One night, Clara came over with groceries. She watched me boil lentils in a dented pot and finally asked, Olivia, how much have you given her in total? I looked at the wall clock, unable to meet her eyes. Over 100,000, maybe more. Clara's jaw clenched. And they've given you back what? Nothing, I whispered. Saying it aloud was like pressing on a bruise that had never healed. Clara shook her head. That's not help. That's exploitation. Her words echoed long after she left. Exploitation. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to believe Vanessa loved me beyond the checks, beyond the sacrifices. But the evidence was in the empty cupboards, the overdue utility bills, the aching loneliness of a house too large for one. Then came the Tuesday. The day began like any other. A gray sky pressed against the windows. My knees throbbed as I shuffled to make tea. Then the phone rang. Vanessa's voice was syrupy, urgent. "Mom, we need to go to the bank. Some papers have to be signed. It's nothing big, just routine. But it's important." I didn't ask questions. I never did. That was my fatal flaw. I just pulled on my cardigan, smoothed the wrinkles in my skirt, and let her drive me there. The bank was cool and bright, humming with fluorescent light. People moved casually, lines snaking slowly at the tellers. No one looked twice at a mother and daughter seated at a table with tidy stacks of papers. No one saw Sebastian's hand gripping my arm under the guise of affection. No one heard the silent scream in my chest as Vanessa pushed the pen toward me. I had seen the documents the night before. I had traced the numbers with shaking fingers. This wasn't a small transfer. It was everything. The last of my savings. The last of me. And as the clock ticked toward 3:15, I realized that if I signed, I would not only lose my money, I would lose myself completely. That was when Mr. Thompson appeared, silver hair gleaming under the lights, a calm expression masking sharp eyes. "Everything all right here?" he asked. For the first time in years, hope sparked in me, small but stubborn. Mr. Thompson's voice was soft, professional, but it pierced the fog around me like a bell ringing in the dark. He adjusted his tie and smiled at all three of us, as though this were a perfectly ordinary conversation. But his eyes never left mine. "Everything all right here?" he asked again, tilting his head slightly. Vanessa's smile brightened, brittle at the edges. "Of course. Just a small family transaction. Nothing complicated." Sebastian's hand pressed harder on my arm beneath the table. My bones screamed. His lips never stopped curving. "We're almost done," he said. "Just waiting for my mother-in-law to sign." The pen trembled in my fingers. I wanted to cry out, to tell this kind stranger that my own flesh and blood was stealing my life from me. But my throat had locked tight, fear lodged in it like a stone. Mr. Thompson glanced down at the table. His gaze lingered on the papers, then drifted casually toward the small bank brochure lying half-folded at the corner. My mind leapt to a desperate idea. With Sebastian distracted, flipping the next page toward me, I slid the brochure under my palm and scrawled jagged words across the white space in the margin. "Help. I'm being coerced. I don't want to sign." I folded it once, hands shaking so violently I thought they might notice, and slid it toward Mr. Thompson with the faintest nudge. He lifted it with the same detached air a man might use to pick up a receipt. His eyes flicked across the words, and in that brief instant his face changed just slightly, a shadow of alarm tightening his jaw before he smoothed it back into professional calm. He nodded, as if I'd merely asked about interest rates. Then he shifted, pressing one hand under the desk in a motion so subtle I almost missed it. My heart leapt. I knew what that meant. The silent alarm. For the first time that afternoon, a breath of relief slid into my lungs. I wasn't alone. Someone had seen me. Someone was going to help. Vanessa leaned closer, perfume thick and cloying, her whisper sharp despite the sugar in her tone. "Mom, just sign. You can't manage all that money anyway. Trust me, it's for your own good." "Poison wrapped in honey," my daughter's voice. Sebastian's grip tightened until my skin ached. "Don't make this ugly, Olivia," he hissed through clenched teeth, though his smile never faltered. "You don't want to cause a scene." I felt a sob claw its way up my throat, but I swallowed it down. I glanced toward the teller windows, one young man counting bills, an older woman tapping her brochure, a man in a suit glued to his phone. Life went on as if nothing were happening. No one knew I was being robbed in broad daylight, with smiles as weapons. The wall clock ticked. 3:15, my nightmare's hour. And yet beneath my terror, something stirred. Defiance. I thought of Peter, of the nights we ate beans so Vanessa could go to camp, of the loans, the sacrifices, the quiet pride that had become my undoing. All of it had led me here, to this table, to this moment. Mr. Thompson straightened. "Actually," he said evenly, "bank protocol requires verification of consent for transactions of this size. Mrs. Anderson, would you mind accompanying me to my office for a private check?" Vanessa's hand shot out, nails biting into my wrist. "That won't be necessary," she said quickly, her smile cracking at the edges. My mother already decided. But Mr. Thompson was already standing, extending his hand toward me like a lifeline. "It's policy," he repeated. "No exceptions." For the first time that afternoon, Sebastian had to release his grip. Mr. Thompson's office was small, tucked away behind glass walls that muted the busy rhythm of the bank. The blinds were half drawn, and sunlight filtered in stripes across the carpet. A family photo sat on his desk beside a small cactus in a ceramic pot simple, ordinary things that radiated a kind of safety I hadn't felt in years. He closed the door gently behind us. "Mrs. Anderson," he said, lowering his voice, "tell me what's really happening." And the dam inside me cracked. The words came out fast, uneven, as though they had been waiting decades for air. I told him about Vanessa, how she had been the child I loved more than my own breath, how every sacrifice had been justified by her smile, how my life had turned into an endless chain of yeses. I told him about Peter, how he had worked until his last heartbeat, and how his medical bills had devoured our savings. I confessed the truth I'd hidden even from myself, that over the years I had given my daughter and her husband more than $100,000, and not a cent had ever come back. My throat burned. "They used Caroline's name," I whispered. "My granddaughter, she's only 8. They hold her up like a lantern to blind me. How can I say no when it's for her?" Mr. Thompson leaned forward, pen poised over a notebook, his expression grave but never judgmental. "And today?" he prompted gently. "Today," I said, staring down at my trembling hands. "They tried to take the last of it. 30,000. Everything I have left to survive on. I told myself I would never give again, but here I am, almost ready to sign." I rubbed my arm where Sebastian's fingers had left dull bruises. "He hurt me," I admitted. "Squeezed so hard I thought he'd break bone. And Vanessa, she just sat there, smiling, watching." The office was silent, except for the hum of the air vent. I felt small, like a child caught in some shameful secret, until Mr. Thompson finally spoke. "Mrs. Anderson, what you've described isn't help. It's financial coercion. In some cases, it's elder abuse. It is illegal." The word rang in my ears. Illegal. I had thought it was duty, sacrifice, love twisted into debt. I had never let myself imagine it had another name. "I don't want to ruin my daughter's life," I whispered. "She's all I have left." Mr. Thompson's eyes softened, but his tone stayed steady. "The question is, are you ready to say no? Not just today, but from now on? Because if you don't, Mrs. Anderson, they will take everything, including your future." My heart pounded as though it wanted out of my chest. The idea of saying no felt like leaping into an abyss. But then I thought of Caroline, growing up watching her mother use love like a weapon. What lesson was I teaching her? That you survive by breaking the people who care about you? Tears blurred my vision. "Yes," I whispered, and the word startled me with its strength. "Yes, I'm ready to say no." Mr. Thompson nodded once. "Then we'll start by canceling this transaction. I'll also place alerts on your accounts, no movement without your presence and identity verification. And I'll give you resources for support. But the boundaries, Mrs. Anderson, that's yours to guard." As he spoke, I looked past him, through the glass wall into the lobby. Vanessa was pacing like a caged animal, her phone clutched to her ear, her smile long gone. Sebastian sat with shoulders hunched, drumming his fingers against the armrest, restless, predatory. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel guilty watching their anxiety. I felt something else, something fierce, long buried, control. When Mr. Thompson opened his office door, the bank lobby felt sharper, as though the fluorescent lights had brightened in the time I was away. Vanessa rushed toward me immediately, her heels clacking against the polished floor. Her smile was stretched so tight it looked like it might snap. "Mom," she said through clenched teeth, "what took so long? We're going to be late. Caroline is waiting." Behind her, Sebastian rose abruptly, nearly tipping over his chair. His jaw was tight, fists curled, the veneer of calm cracking at the edges. He didn't come closer. Not yet, but his eyes burned like coals. I stopped a few feet away, close enough to see every flicker of panic on Vanessa's face. My knees trembled, but I forced myself to stand tall, the words building in my chest like a storm. For decades, I had been the woman who swallowed her protests, the mother who folded her spine into 1,000 bows. But something inside me had shifted in Mr. Thompson's office. "I'm not going to sign," I said. The silence that followed was so complete it roared. Conversations at the teller windows faltered. The man in the charcoal suit looked up from his phone. Even the air conditioning seemed to hush, waiting for the explosion. Vanessa blinked at me, her green eyes, Peter's eyes, flashing wide with disbelief. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling but still trying to carry that sugary tone. "Mom, we already talked about this. It's just a transfer, temporary." "It's not temporary," I cut in, my voice firmer than I had expected. "It's my retirement. It's the last money I have, and I'm keeping it." Sebastian stepped forward, the predator in him unmasked. But the 2 security guards Mr. Thompson had summoned shifted instantly, planting themselves between us. His lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Olivia, don't be ridiculous. You don't even have expenses. We can invest this better for the family." "For the family," I repeated, and the words came out with a bitter laugh that surprised even me. "Like the 40,000 I gave you for your house down payment, or the 20,000 when you lost your job. Tell me, Sebastian, how much of that has been paid back?" His smile broke, revealing teeth clenched hard enough to crack. Vanessa's tears spilled suddenly, but they were not the tears of the little girl who once scraped her knee on the driveway. No, these were theater tears honed by years of practice. "Mom, how can you do this to me, to us, after everything we've shared?" "Love doesn't look like this," I said, my voice shaking but steady enough to carry. "Love doesn't mean bruises on my arm. Love doesn't mean tricking me into signing away my life. You call this love, but all I see is theft." Her eyes widened in horror, not at the truth, but at the fact that I had spoken it aloud here, in public, where strangers were watching. Heads turned. An older woman in line frowned, whispering to the man beside her. A teller leaned forward, curiosity etched in his young face. For the first time in years, the story was no longer ours to hide. Vanessa lowered her voice, desperation curdling into anger. "Fine," she hissed, swiping at her tears. "Don't transfer all of it. Just half. 10,000, that's all we need." I stared at her, my daughter, the baby I once swore to protect, and realized the truth that had been waiting all along. There was no emergency. There was no just this once. There was only their hunger and my endless supply of yeses. "Ishok mi head. No, Vanessa." Her jaw dropped. She had never heard that word from me, not once in 35 years. Vanessa's mouth opened, then closed again. Her tears streaked down in perfect lines, but the mask was crumbling. I could see the fury beneath, the way her lips quivered, not from sadness, but from outrage. How dare I, her mother, deny her for the first time in her life? Sebastian shifted on his feet, his face twisting as though he were holding back a snarl. His hands curled into fists, but the guards took a subtle step forward. For once, he kept his distance. "What do you mean, no?" Vanessa whispered, her voice trembling, but not from weakness, from rage. She leaned closer, as if proximity could bend me back into submission. "Mom, we're family. Families share. Families sacrifice. Caroline is your granddaughter. Do you want her to suffer just because you've decided to be selfish?" That word selfish landed like a slap. For 69 years, I had shaped myself around avoiding it. Every yes I had ever spoken was a defense against being called selfish. But now, hearing it from my own daughter's lips, I felt something inside me ignite. I straightened, drawing a shaky breath. "It isn't selfish to protect what's mine. It's survival. I have given and given until there is nothing left, and you have taken every drop." The lobby had grown quiet. People were pretending not to listen, but their ears tilted our way, their eyes darting in stolen glances. The weight of witnesses pressed against Vanessa, and I saw panic flicker in her eyes. She dropped her voice, clutching my hand as though she could force me into intimacy. "Okay, fine," she said, her tone softening into that poisoned honey she used so well. "Not all of it, just 10,000. That's all we need to get through this rough patch. Please, Mom, don't do this to me." I pulled my hand free. The gesture felt monumental, as if I were tugging not just my fingers but decades of myself out of her grasp. "What rough patch, Vanessa? You and Sebastian both have jobs. You have a house. Caroline has everything she needs. What's the emergency? She faltered. For the first time, her well-rehearsed lines failed her. Sebastian stepped in, his stone-dripping venom hidden beneath civility. What about your granddaughter? Huh? Are you going to let Caroline pay the price because you suddenly decided to play stubborn? She'll lose her lessons, her opportunities. She'll grow up resenting you. My heart twisted at Caroline's name, but I steadied myself. I thought of her crayon drawings of the giant grandma with arms wide enough to shelter the world. If I signed, those arms would be broken sticks. What lesson would I be teaching her? That love meant exploitation? That fear and guilt were currency? No, I said again, louder this time, the word echoing like a bell. Caroline will not suffer. You are her parents. You provide for her. That is your job, not mine. I am done. Vanessa gasped as though I had struck her. But what I saw in her eyes was not pain, it was hate. A cold, crystallized hatred born from the first time I had ever drawn a boundary. She leaned in, her voice sharp as glass. Fine, Mom, if that's what you want. But don't come crying when you're alone in that empty house, with no one to care for you. Don't call me when you're sick, when you can't walk, when you need someone to take you to the hospital, because we won't be there. Each word was a blade, meant to slice open my deepest fear, abandonment. For a heartbeat, I wavered. The image of a lonely future pressed against me. But then I remembered Peter's voice on the couch one night, when we'd watched a show about scams targeting seniors. Fear is the most powerful tool manipulators have. They make you imagine horrors that might never happen. I lifted my chin. If that's your choice, so be it, but I won't sign. The bank fell into a hush so thick, it seemed even the air had stopped. And in that silence I realized the chains were breaking. The moment the words left my mouth, I won't sign, a shift rippled through the room. The guards straightened, no longer discreet shadows but solid walls between me and the two people who had drained me for decades. Mr. Thompson's voice cut through the charged silence, calm but sharp with authority. Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Wilson. He used their names with a formality that felt like a blade. Mrs. Anderson has made her wishes clear. Continuing to pressure her is considered harassment. You need to leave. Sebastian's mask cracked. He leaned forward, his voice low and seething. She's my mother-in-law. I have every right to talk to her. Not when you're intimidating her on bank property, Mr. Thompson replied smoothly, his hand signaling to the guards. This ends now. Vanessa turned to me, her eyes blazing, her cheeks wet with tears that looked more like weapons than sorrow. Mom, you can't do this. After everything we've been through, after all the love I've given. Love? The word burst out of me before I could stop it. My voice was louder than I'd meant, and people in line turned their heads. You call it love when you watch your husband bruise my arm? You call it love when you trick me into giving away every dollar I have? That's not love, Vanessa. That's theft. Gasps drifted through the lobby. Vanessa's composure shattered. Her voice dropped to a hiss. Fine, but don't expect us to be there for you. Not now. Not ever. Sebastian's hand pressed against the small of her back, guiding her toward the exit. He leaned in close as they passed. His words a venomous whisper meant only for me. You'll regret this, Olivia. Sooner than you think. I shivered, but didn't respond. For once, silence was stronger than defense. They walked away without looking back, their figures shrinking through the glass doors, swallowed by the sunlight outside. Two shadows receding, taking with them years of manipulation, years of my complicity. I collapsed into one of the waiting chairs, my legs trembling not from fear but from release. The years of yeses, of self-erasure, had built up a tension I hadn't known was there until it drained out of me all at once. Mr. Thompson sat beside me, his presence steady as stone. How do you feel? He asked gently. I closed my eyes. Scared, I admitted, my voice cracking. Then, softer but steadier, but also free. For the first time in my life, I feel free. The hum of the bank returned to normal, customers resuming their business as if nothing monumental had occurred. But inside me, everything had shifted. A line had been drawn, sharp and irreversible. The price of saying no was terrifying threats. Abandonment, a future filled with uncertainty. Yet in that moment, I knew the price of never saying no would have been worse. The loss of myself. The first night after the bank incident, I barely slept. Every creak of the house felt louder, every shadow heavier. I sat in Peter's old recliner with the lights on, clutching a cup of cold tea that I never drank. My phone lit up over and over again with Vanessa's name. I didn't answer. I couldn't. By morning, the silence felt unnatural, a hollow that pressed against my chest. Then came the messages. Mom, I know you're upset, but we need to talk. Mom, Caroline is asking about you. She's so sad. Please don't do this to her. Sebastian says he's sorry if he hurt you. It wasn't intentional. Don't be dramatic. Each line was a needle, designed to pierce through the armor I was desperately trying to build. Guilt. Guilt was her sharpest tool, and she knew exactly how to wield it. On the third day, they came in person. I saw them through the lace curtain before they even rang the bell. Vanessa, in a yellow dress she knew was my favorite color. Sebastian standing stiff beside her, and little Caroline between them, clutching a drawing against her chest. My heart lurched at the sight of my granddaughter's bright eyes. The bell rang. Once, twice, then in frantic succession. Vanessa's voice, syrupy and frantic, carried through the door. Mom, I know you're in there. Please, we just want to talk. Caroline misses you. Look, she made you a drawing. Then Caroline's small voice pierced through. Why won't Grandma open the door, Mommy? Did I do something wrong? I pressed my back against the wall, trembling. My body screamed to run to her, to scoop her into my arms, to wipe away her confusion with the truth, that she was innocent, that none of this was her fault. But I couldn't. I remembered Mr. Thompson's words. Fear and guilt are their weapons. Don't hand them back your power. The knocking grew louder. Vanessa's voice cracked, shifting from sugar to steel. Mom, you're being paranoid. You're letting strangers fill your head with lies. Just open the door and we'll sort this out. Tears blurred my vision. My granddaughter's shadow moved on the porch, small and restless. I turned up the radio Peter had given me for our 30th anniversary, filling the air with classical music to drown out their voices. I sat in the hallway until the knocking finally stopped, my heart aching with every step they took away from my door. That night, my phone lit up again, Clara's name this time. I answered with shaking hands. Olivia, she said carefully. Vanessa told me what happened. She says you're confused, that you think they're trying to steal from you. She said they only wanted to help you invest your money. Her tone carried that familiar edge of condescension, the one reserved for people who had lost their grip on reality. Is that what she told you? I asked, my voice raw. Did she also tell you Sebastian left bruises on my arm? Did she tell you I had to pass a note to the bank manager begging for help? The line went quiet. He really hurt you? Clara asked finally. Yes, I whispered, anger sparking beneath the exhaustion. And Vanessa watched. She did nothing. Silence again. Clara's voice, softer now. Olivia, I didn't know. No one knows, I said bitterly, because all they see are the checks and the smiles. They never see the threats, the manipulations, the way I've been bled dry. When we hung up, I realized the truth. Even those closest to me couldn't see the abuse for what it was. It wasn't bruises on the face or broken bones. It was years of subtle theft wrapped in the language of love, and I was the only one who could stop it. On the fourth day, just when I thought the storm had finally passed, the doorbell rang again. My stomach tightened as I peered through the curtain, and there she was, Caroline, alone. She stood on my porch in her school uniform, her pink backpack slung over one shoulder, her small face lit with a nervous smile. She looked so young, so fragile, like a bird that had lost its nest. For a moment I froze. My mind screamed that this was another trap, that Vanessa had sent her as bait. But my heart couldn't resist the sight of my granddaughter standing there alone. I opened the door. Hi, Grandma, she said, her voice bright but tinged with uncertainty. Mommy says you're mad at us, but I didn't do anything wrong, did I? Her question sliced through me like glass. I knelt down, tears already burning my eyes. No, my love, you didn't do anything wrong. Grandma isn't mad at you. Then why don't you come visit? Why don't you answer when Mommy calls from home? Her green eyes, so much like her mother's, but still filled with innocence, searched my face for answers. I struggled to find words that wouldn't scar her, words that could protect her from the ugly truth. Sometimes adults have problems, sweetheart. Problems they need to work out. But that doesn't mean I don't love you. I will always love you, she brightened, pulling out the drawing she had been clutching. I made you something. It was like the others me as a giant with huge arms. But this time, the giant wasn't smiling. This time, the giant's mouth was turned down, her eyes shaded blue. Why is Grandma sad in your drawing? I asked, my throat tightening. Caroline shrugged, her little fingers fiddling with the crayon lines. Because Mommy says you're sad. She says some bad men at the bank told you things that confused you. Is it true, Grandma? Are there bad men? I closed my eyes for a moment, realizing how quickly Vanessa had spun her version of the story, how fast she had poisoned even her daughter's innocence. I took Caroline's hands in mine. No, my love, there are no bad men. The men at the bank helped me. They protected me when I needed it most. She tilted her head, trying to understand. But Mommy says, sometimes, I interrupted gently, adults see the same thing in different ways, like when you look at a cloud and think it's a cat, but your friend says it's a dog. You're both looking at the same cloud, but you see it differently. Her brow furrowed, then she nodded slowly, as if that explanation made sense to her young mind. We spent the next hour coloring together at my kitchen table, her laughter filling the house like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For that brief time, I could pretend nothing had changed, that she was just my granddaughter visiting her grandma. But when it was time for her to go because I knew Vanessa would come soon, Caroline asked one more question. Grandma, you're not going to give me money for ballet anymore, are you? The innocence in her voice broke me in half. Even at 8 years old, she had learned to equate my love with money. It was the deepest wound of all, not just losing my daughter, but watching the poison trickle into the next generation. I hugged her tight, whispering, I love you because you're you, not because of money. Never forget that. But as I closed the door behind her, I felt the full weight of what I had done. By always saying yes, I hadn't just lost my savings. I had taught my granddaughter that love was something bought and bartered. That night after Caroline left, the house felt unbearably quiet. Her laughter still echoed faintly in the walls, clashing against the silence that returned like a heavy tide. I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by photographs that now felt like witnesses to my failures, smiling faces trapped behind glass, mocking me with the illusion of a happy family. I picked up one frame Vanessa at 10 years old, holding her first trophy from a school competition. I remembered how she'd begged for extra lessons, how Peter and I had scraped together the money, skipping dinners out and postponing repairs on our old car just to pay the fees. I had thought back then that the sacrifice was noble, that it proved the depth of my love. But what had I truly given her? Not resilience, not gratitude, only entitlement. Caroline's words haunted me. You're not going to give me money for ballet anymore, are you? At 8 years old, she already linked my worth as a grandmother to how much I could spend. I had taught my daughter to measure love in dollars, and now my granddaughter was learning the same arithmetic. I pressed my palms against my face and sobbed raw, bitter sobs that clawed up from a place I had buried for decades. All those years of giving, of saying yes until the word became my prison, had created not love but dependency. My family didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a wallet with a beating heart. And yet, I couldn't hate Caroline. She was innocent, caught in a web spun long before she could understand it. I remembered her small hand in mine earlier, the way she tilted her head when I told her clouds could look like cats or dogs. She still had room to learn another way. The phone rang suddenly, jolting me. Vanessa's name glowed on the screen. I let it ring, let it buzz into voicemail. A few minutes later, the message came through. Mom, I don't know why you're acting like this. Sebastian and I love you. We only wanted to help you. If you don't want to sign, fine, but don't shut us out. Caroline needs you. She cries for you every night. Her voice broke into practiced sobs, but I heard the steel beneath them. The manipulation was as clear as glass now. I deleted the message without listening again. My hands shook, but not from weakness, from something new, something sharper. Resolve. Still, as I climbed into bed, the silence pressed in on me. The sheets felt colder without Peter. The walls seemed to whisper Vanessa's threats. You'll be alone. You'll have no one. I curled into myself and wondered if she was right. What if this path of no's led me to nothing but emptiness? What if my last years were spent in a house echoing with ghosts instead of laughter? But then I remembered Caroline's drawing the giant grandma with sad eyes. She had already seen the truth, even if she didn't fully understand it. If I wanted her to learn anything from me, it had to be this: that love is not money, that strength is not saying yes until you disappear. I wiped my tears and whispered into the dark, as if Peter could still hear me. I will not give them another $1, not one. The words felt fragile, but they were a beginning. By the next morning, the battle had shifted. Vanessa wasn't standing at my door or calling in the middle of the night anymore. She had chosen a new strategy, turning the family against me. Clara called again, her voice laced with hesitation. "Olivia, I spoke with Vanessa. She says you're confused, that some men at the bank put ideas in your head, that you're not yourself lately." I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles whitened. "Confused? Clara, she and Sebastian tried to steal the last of my savings. He hurt me. I had to write a note to the manager to get help." Clara's silence stretched thin over the line. "Vanessa didn't say that." "Of course she didn't," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "She told you her version, the same way she told Caroline. She's rewriting the story, Clara, making me the villain because I finally said no." Clara sighed. "Olivia, she's your daughter. Families help each other." "This isn't help," I interrupted, the words breaking from me like glass. "This is exploitation. For years I've been nothing but their ATM. I've lost more than $100,000 to them, Clara. Money Peter and I worked for, sacrificed for, and they never gave back a cent." My sister's tone softened, almost pitying. "But she's still your child." "Yes," I whispered, my throat tight. "And that's what makes it hurt the most." When I hung up, I felt the walls closing in tighter. Vanessa was clever, always had been. She knew how to play the dutiful daughter in public, how to frame her manipulations as love. To the rest of the family, I was becoming paranoid Olivia, the widow who let grief twist her mind. That night, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Clara. It was a message from an old church friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. I ran into Vanessa. She said, "You're struggling with your memory. I'm praying for you." My stomach dropped. Vanessa wasn't just manipulating me. She was painting me as senile to anyone who would listen. Later that week, as I was watering Peter's roses in the garden, I heard a voice over the fence, my neighbor, Mrs. Gray. She hesitated before speaking. "Olivia, dear, Vanessa stopped by. She said you've been under a lot of stress, that you might need supervision. Is everything all right?" I forced a smile, but inside my heart pounded. Supervision. The word carried the weight of something darker: guardianship, control, the possibility of being declared incompetent. Was that Vanessa's endgame? Not just my money, but my autonomy? That night, I sat in the living room staring at my phone. Vanessa had escalated, twisting the narrative until I barely recognized myself in the stories she told others. If I didn't act, she would not only take my money, she would erase me. I pulled out a notebook and began to write. Every dollar I had given, every bruise, every manipulation. Line by line, I built my truth. If Vanessa wanted a war of stories, I would not let mine be silenced. A week later, just as the bruises on my arm were fading into yellow shadows, the doorbell rang again. My heart clenched. I almost didn't answer, but when I peered through the curtain, I froze. Caroline, not Vanessa, not Sebastian, just my granddaughter, standing there with her backpack, her eyes wide and serious. I opened the door at once. "Grandma," she whispered, "can I come in?" Her voice trembled, as though she'd been practicing the question for days. I led her inside, heart aching with equal parts relief and dread. We sat at the kitchen table where she'd once spread crayons across every surface. Now she folded her small hands neatly, like a child rehearsing for a performance. "Mommy says you don't love us anymore," she said finally. "She says the people at the bank tricked you into hating our family." The words stung, sharper than anything Vanessa had thrown at me. They weren't just lies. They were poison planted in a child's heart. I reached for Caroline's hand. "Sweetheart, that's not true. I love you more than anything, but loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you." She tilted her head, confusion furrowing her brow. "Mommy says you're sick, that you forget things, that you think people are stealing from you when they're not." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. Vanessa had gone further than I'd feared. She wasn't just calling me paranoid behind closed doors, she was teaching her daughter to see me as broken. Tears blurred my vision. Caroline, do you think Grandma forgets things? Her lips parted, then closed again. Sometimes, Mommy says you do. I wanted to scream, to tell her everything, the lies, the manipulation, the bruises. But how could I put that weight on an 8-year-old's shoulders? She was innocent, caught between love and loyalty. Instead, I whispered, I remember enough. I remember how much I love you. I remember every drawing you made for me, every hug you gave me. That's what matters. She looked down at her lap. Grandma, if you really love me, you'll help us. Just a little, for my ballet recital dress. Mommy says it's $200. If I don't have it, I can't dance. And then everyone will laugh at me. My chest caved in. Even here, even through the innocence of a child, Vanessa's voice reached me. She had turned her daughter into a messenger. Caroline's words weren't her own, they were bait tied with ribbons. I lifted her chin gently, forcing her eyes to meet mine. Do you love me because I give you money? Or because I'm your grandma? Her small face tightened. Both, she said softly, as though it were the most natural answer in the world. The truth shattered me. Even my granddaughter, the one pure light I clung to, had learned to measure love by what I could provide. That night, after Caroline left, I sat in the dark with Peter's old blanket wrapped around me. The betrayal wasn't just Vanessa's anymore, it had seeped into the next generation. And for the first time, I wondered if I hadn't just lost my daughter, but my granddaughter too. The next evening, my phone rang again. A number I didn't recognize flashed across the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Grandma? Caroline's small voice chirped. My heart tightened. Yes, sweetheart, how are you? I miss you, she said. When are you coming to visit? When are we going to the park again? For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe this was just a child longing for her grandmother. But then the words shifted. Grandma, she continued, her voice rehearsed now, my birthday is in 2 months. I wanted to ask if you can help me buy a new dress for my ballet recital. Mommy says it costs $200 and we don't have the money this month. My chest went cold. It wasn't Caroline's idea. It was Vanessa's. She had put her daughter on the phone, using her as a tool sharp enough to slice me open. Caroline, I said carefully, my voice breaking, let me speak to your mother. There was a shuffle. Then Vanessa's voice came on, honey over steel. Hello, Mom. Caroline just wanted to talk to you. She misses you terribly. You wouldn't deny your granddaughter something so simple, would you? A dress? A moment of joy. I clenched the phone until my hand shook. Vanessa, stop using your daughter as a messenger. If you want to ask me for money, ask yourself. Don't put her in the middle. Her voice rose an octave, feigning indignation. Manipulate you? Is that what you think this is? Mom, it's a dress. Every normal grandmother would want to buy something special for her granddaughter. I closed my eyes, summoning strength from somewhere deeper than fear. It became manipulation the moment you put your child on the phone to beg for money after I said no. Don't twist this. The silence on the line stretched so long, I thought she had hung up. Then, her mask cracked. Fine. Yes, I told Caroline to ask. Do you know why? Because that's who you've always been, the grandma who gives. The hero. The savior. And now, out of nowhere, you've decided to stop. Do you realize how cruel that looks to her? To me? Her words cut, because in them was a shard of truth. I had built my identity around being the giver. I had enjoyed the gratitude, the admiration, the image of being indispensable. But that identity had cost me everything. You're right, I admitted, my voice low. I liked being the hero. I liked being needed. But Vanessa, do you realize what that did to us? It turned you into someone who can't solve her own problems. And it turned me into someone who doesn't feel loved unless she's giving. That isn't love. That's bondage. On the other end, her breath caught. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd pierced the armor, but then she hissed. So what now, Mom? What am I supposed to tell Caroline? That her grandmother doesn't care enough to buy her a simple dress? That she has to stand on stage ashamed while the other girls sparkle? The image ripped at me, but I forced myself to stay steady. You'll tell her the truth, that you and Sebastian are her parents, and it's your responsibility to provide. You'll tell her that Grandma loves her no matter what she wears. That's the lesson she needs, not that love is bought. Another silence. Then her voice, colder than I'd ever heard it. If that's what you want, fine. But don't expect Caroline to understand. Don't expect her to choose you over us. The line went dead. I sat there, the phone heavy in my lap, realizing the war had escalated into territory I had never imagined. Vanessa wasn't just after my money anymore. She was willing to sacrifice her own daughter's innocence to get it. After that phone call, I knew something had to change. Vanessa wasn't going to stop, not with pleading, not with threats, not even with her daughter's innocence. She would press until there was nothing left of me. If I wanted to survive, I needed help. The next Tuesday evening, I walked into the downtown library for the first time in years. It smelled of old paper and polish, the way time does when it's kept on shelves. In a small conference room at the back, 12 chairs were arranged in a circle. On the wall, a whiteboard with the words Financial Abuse Support Group written in blue marker. I almost turned and left, but then a woman with kind eyes touched my arm. "I'm Sandra," she said gently. "Welcome. You're safe here." Safe. The word felt like a balm. I sat down, my hands trembling. One by one, people shared their stories. A man in his 60s whose brother had gambled away his house. A woman younger than me whose son had forged her signature to drain her savings. An older lady who had signed her home over to her daughter, only to be thrown out months later. Their voices cracked with the same shame that had been choking me. And as I listened, the realization grew. I was not alone. My suffering wasn't some private failing. It had a name. It had patterns. It was abuse. When my turn came, the words spilled out. I told them about Vanessa's endless requests, about Sebastian's grip on my arm, about Caroline's little voice on the phone asking for a dress. I told them about the $100,000 gone, about the silent alarm at the bank, about the terror of finally saying no. No one judged me. No one called me selfish or paranoid. They nodded, eyes wet, some reaching across to squeeze my hand. Afterward, Sandra leaned in. "Olivia, you're stronger than you think. You broke the cycle once. You can keep breaking it. But it will take practice. It will take boundaries." That night, for the first time in years, I slept without nightmares. The days that followed were strange but lighter. I read books that had gathered dust on my shelves. I walked in the park where Peter and I used to stroll on Sundays. I even went to a cafe and ordered a slice of chocolate cake without calculating whether I should save the money. Each small act felt rebellious, almost revolutionary. But Vanessa hadn't disappeared. She called less often now, but the messages were sharper, colder. "Mom, Caroline is devastated. She doesn't understand why you've abandoned her. Mom, maybe you should see a doctor. This isn't normal behavior. What if you're developing dementia?" Her tactics had shifted from begging to undermining, from asking for money to questioning my sanity. I deleted every message. Still, the sting lingered. The fear of being alone crept into my bones late at night. What if she was right? What if age was eroding me and I couldn't even see it? Then, one evening, my phone rang again. I expected Vanessa, but the voice that answered was younger, steadier. "Mrs. Anderson? I'm Caroline. Not your granddaughter, the other Caroline. Arthur's daughter, your great niece." I blinked, startled. "Arthur's daughter?" "Yes. Aunt Clara told my dad what happened. He told me, and I needed to see you. She came by the next day. Tall, brown hair pulled into a ponytail, her smile both nervous and determined. Over tea, she told me her own story. A mother with a gambling addiction who drained her savings, manipulated her, even forged her name. It was always an emergency. "Always the last time," she said, her voice hard with memory. I had to cut her off to save myself, and I did. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it worked. I survived. Her words were like a mirror, showing me that survival was possible, even when love was tangled with betrayal. For the first time since Peter's death, I felt something new blooming in my chest. Not just relief, not just defiance. Hope. 6 months passed after that fateful day at the bank, and the woman staring back at me in the mirror hardly looked like the Olivia who once trembled at the sound of her daughter's voice. The lines on my face were the same, the silver in my hair unchanged. But there was a difference in my eyes. They were clear. They belonged to someone who had finally begun to live for herself. I sold the house Peter and I had lived in for 40 years. The walls were soaked with ghosts of arguments whispered, of checks written in despair, of nights I'd stayed up calculating how to give more when there was nothing left. Letting go felt like shedding an old skin. I bought a small cottage across town, nothing extravagant but mine. Every chair, every curtain, every plant in the garden was chosen because I loved it, not because it would please someone else. When I told Vanessa, she screamed down the phone, her words sharp as daggers. "You're wasting money. That house was part of our future. How could you sell it without telling me?" For the first time, I laughed instead of apologizing. "It was never yours, Vanessa. It was mine, and now it's gone." Weeks later, I boarded a plane to Italy. It was my first passport, my first trip abroad, my first act of rebellion against decades of self-erasure. I walked the cobbled streets of Tuscany, sipped coffee under sun-washed terraces, painted landscapes in small notebooks. I sent pictures to my great-niece Caroline, who would become my anchor of encouragement. "You're not becoming someone new," she texted me once. "You're finally being who you always were." Vanessa found out, of course. She called me from across the ocean, her voice shaking with fury. "You're spending your retirement money on a vacation while your family struggles? What if you get sick? What if something happens?" I gazed out at the vineyards rolling green to the horizon and said quietly, "Then I'll face it when it comes, not before." And I ended the call. When I returned, lighter, stronger, I took up painting classes with a woman named Eleanor, who had survived her own battles. I began volunteering at a shelter for women escaping abuse. For once, I was helping not from guilt, but from strength. And then, one Saturday morning, my doorbell rang. Caroline, my granddaughter, no longer the innocent 8-year-old, but now 11, stood there. Taller, older, her green eyes holding a seriousness beyond her years. "Grandma," she said, stepping into my new living room as though she belonged there. "I need to ask you something. Is it true? Did Mommy and Daddy try to steal your money at the bank?" The air thickened. I had rehearsed this moment for years, and now here it was, raw and real. She deserved the truth. "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered. "It's true." She nodded slowly, the puzzle pieces fitting together in her young mind. "I thought so. I heard things. I saw the letters you wrote me. Mommy hid them, but I found them. They said you loved me, that it wasn't my fault." Tears blurred my vision. Every word was true. "I will always love you, Caroline." She bit her lip, then said something that pierced me deeper than any of Vanessa's accusations ever had. "When I'm older, when I can make my own choices, I want to have a real relationship with you, not like before. Not because of money, just because I love you." We hugged, and in that embrace I felt hope bloom again, not for Vanessa, perhaps never for Vanessa, but for the next generation. That night, I sat under the stars with my journal and wrote, "Today my granddaughter found me not the ATM her parents had built, but the grandmother who loves her for real. And for the first time, I believe our love might survive the lies. I am 71 years old. I have lost money, time, and years of myself, but I have gained something far greater, the strength to live without permission, the courage to say no, the chance to reclaim the woman I always was. And this time, I will never give her away again."